Hello and welcome to the Breaking Free podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Francis, and today I'm very grateful and very humbly joined by Amanda Kane. Amanda is a mentor at Lions Hub Homeschool Group. She is awesome. She's a former teacher as well, so she's here to share a bit about her experience I'm 30, so she's had 30 years experience since I've been here in the school system, and now she's jumped over and doing the Lions Hub. So she's here to share about her experiences from one extreme to the other. I believe it's chalk and cheese. These kids are awesome that Amanda's mentoring. They're phenomenal students. So not even students, they're just part of the crew. So Amanda's here. Welcome, Amanda, to my show today. Let's have an
I
awesome chat. Let's inspire some whoever's out
absolutely.
there listening and watching that there are alternatives out there and there are teachers like you that are mentoring and guiding these kids. They're not just being guided and mentored by anyone. They are former teachers. So I just want to make that one clear. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you. Oh, I know you're right. I think I think there are so many teachers probably in the system, Nathan, who know they're more than what the system wants them to be.
Yeah, that's well said because I knew I was more than that
Oh,
too. And yeah, went on that journey myself. So, Amanda, with the 30 years you had, well, nearly 30 years experience, not sure how long you might have spent in the mainstream system. What was your experience inside there? Good, bad, ugly?
yeah. I
Yeah.
think when I think about it and when you talk about, chalk and cheese, I think you're exactly right. But in a way, I like to see it as a full circle because the
Mm,
thing was probably where the foundation of what I really believe in was laid, and that was in Cape York, in an Indigenous community. And that was just able to give me the understanding that we can be more, like that we're not this bearer of knowledge who holds, the information and the truth. That instead, being put in a classroom with Indigenous kids where I didn't, understand or know anything about the culture, they were my teachers. And, being able to be a teacher, but a friend and a, mentor and guiding them, and then them teaching me was kind of like this beautiful gift I was given as a, first year teacher. And then I stayed 5 years. Um, but then, I've been able to experience systems not only in Australia, but also in the United States. But again, they were all mainstream systems, whether it was public or private. And I was really bound, but at the same time, although you're bound and you've got these kind of rules, I think, I was chatting to you before, Nathan, about I think I've always sort of pushed against them a little bit, but not quite knowing that I was, wanting to do things a little bit differently. But I think half the time you're on a bit of a hamster wheel,
mm.
and that's the nature of the mainstream system. We're on a hamster wheel. We've got boxes to check. We've got, outcomes to meet. And if we don't do it, we are potentially in trouble. And the kids come in and they churn through. And I think one of the other, probably night and day when I reflect, it's thinking about the potential that I saw in the kids in the mainstream, but they weren't quite able to meet it because of the system they were bound in and what
Yeah,
I was bound by.
that's a big one too because there's
Yeah.
so much potential, right? But it gets
Squashed.
squashed. Good word. Yeah.
And you can only, kind of color outside the lines for so long, until
Yeah.
you're going to know you're going to get in trouble. Like I remember doing something, I was in a private boys' school in Sydney, and we were talking this day about some pretty big topics around white privilege. Private boys' school, one of the most affluent suburbs in Australia. That's a pretty sensitive topic with, young boys. And that afternoon, I remember driving home and I saw on my phone the principal was calling me. And I was like, well, here it goes. I'm going to be in trouble. You know, I pushed, against what they were meant to be teaching. I walked into other kids' classrooms and the teachers had, the whole let's, put Captain Cook on a pedestal and let's teach colonialism to our beautiful white privileged boys. Well, I
Mm.
wouldn't do that. I wanted to always show the other side, and they loved it and they wanted to be thinking critically, but there was always that fear of when am I going to get in trouble here? And I think now being in a system that isn't a system. It's a free place where I get to support kids who are homeschooling. I'm not bound by that because we're on a, I'm on a journey kind of with the kids and with the families, and we don't need to worry about, because all we wanted to do is teaching our kids to question things. We're not preaching anything. We're not, trying to push a certain agenda. We are just simply asking our kids to question.
Which is awesome. And I'd love to reiterate that with you too. Question themselves, question what's going on. Is that the questioning we're going with here? Because in the system, it's one way of learning, whereas you're allowing them to take more of control over their own learning, to explore things for themselves more, but then being able to speak about it without having the, oh, you're wrong, oh, that's wrong, whatever. Yeah, tell me more about that.
Absolutely. And last year I remember we were doing a unit on food awareness and food history.
Yeah.
And so fabulous. We got to, go back, on a timeline and unpack, what did traditional cultures eat? So we'd unpack, then we move forward into our modern day. Okay, let's have a look. It wasn't, is this, this food pyramid is wrong. It was, let's have a look at what we're recommended to eat. Let's unpack this. Let's ask some questions. Oh, so traditional cultures ate this. Oh, we're being recommended to eat a lot of packaged food and a lot of sugar, wheat. Why? Why do you think this is? And, the kids for themselves worked out, this is all about money. I'm like, oh, is it? Really? Why do you think that? And it's those sorts of questions. We looked at toothpaste, for an example, and we were looking at ingredients. And so we got out the safety data sheet. The safety data sheet is there for humans, but most people don't know it exists. So we looked it up and they looked it up themselves. I said, well, go on, look at some of the ingredients and look up the safety data sheet. And they're like, Amanda, so much of this will kill so many rats, because that's the way they work it out. And I said, really? And they said, Amanda, why would this be in our food? Or why would this be in our toothpaste? Great question, guys. Thank you for asking. This is what we need you to ask. And and that's simply what we really want for the kids. We don't want them to be this kind of non-thinking sheep, which we know the school systems were started on. If we look back at why was school started, they wanted a nation of, workers. They didn't want a nation of thinkers.
Modern day slavery.
Modern day slavery. And the saddest thing is, Nathan, I think, having been in so many different systems, nothing really has changed in those systems.
No.
There was, one school I got to work in which was trying to break free of that. But for the most part, that's exactly what it's still like. Sit in rows, be quiet, do your work, hand it in. You're asked, you're questioning me, get back on with what you need to do. So, yeah, it's kind of scary to think it started like that and it's still like that. We haven't really come.
It's an important, you're right. It's also an important life skill that you're showing or mentoring these kids through, is being able to ask questions and also looking up the information, because it is all there. And these children seeing what's in the food, what's in the toothpaste, and then you're probably asking them, okay, well, what can you buy or get that's better than that? And you're probably going to farmers markets and showing them all that stuff. It's awesome. And that's an important life skill, because a lot of these kids don't read the labels of the food that they're eating. So then they're basically eating their behavior and whatever they're feeling in that packet of food with the numbers and stuff. So that's awesome that you're sort of saying, hey, check this out here. What's the difference between this and fresh? And it's like, yeah, it's awesome. Important life skill.
Knowing as well, let's not just blindly, it doesn't mean we need to be, crazy questioning in a negative sense, but it's also, we don't need to be blindly trusting everything either.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it was a really good exercise to look at. Well, why would we being, asked to eat so much packaged food? What is packaged food, all about, really? So
yeah, it's awesome. With the Lions, I made a little mind map yesterday when we recorded the podcast for next week, which is super awesome. We'll promote that later. What we've got here is you're doing things like family camps, entrepreneurial courses. Now, these are things that don't get taught in the mainstream system for those that are listening and watching. The mainstream system's a lot about resume and cover letter writing and career expos. this place isn't about that, which is awesome. You got kids are doing podcasts, which is what yesterday's episode was all about for next week, and homemaking books and ebooks and all these things. Now, let's go there. You're doing some special things here because these kids are finding their voice, and that's super awesome. So tell me about that. All of that stuff.
Well, the cool thing is, number one, first and foremost, because these kids are homeschooled, the education is the parents' responsibility. That's, ultimately they're homeschooled kids.
Yep.
But we do a beautiful job of being able to support that journey. So we kind of look at our role as this beautiful kind of, like river almost that gets to follow alongside their own, river or stream. We want to complement their journey. So the kids, number one, if we think about their life as a homeschool child in the home, would that parent come along and say, do this, do that at this level, finish this book? They wouldn't, because that's not what homeschool is all about. We want to match where the child is. So the kids have a really big say in the units that we create. So we always start there. We give the kids an overarching theme, and then the kids help us design what we'll do, because then they're engaged, they're interested, they're happy, they know that they've had a say in it, they've got that agency. We also talk to the families about it. So the families have to be on board too, because this isn't just about us, this is about everyone. It's the village. We know we can't raise these kids alone. It's a village that, is doing this. So as an example, term one, we have this overarching theme of survival. And in 2023, we did more of like a bush survival kind of style, like inquiry with our text that we looked at and whatnot. For 2024, I had shown the kids a video of my son doing a deadlift. Anyway, I said, oh, how heavy do you think it is, guys? Because he was, I think, 13 at the time. They're like, oh, 50 kilos. Or I said, well, actually, it was 100.
Oh.
Some of the older boys were a little bit like, what? Like, what?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's sparked all these conversations in what the human body is capable of. What can the body do? What is peak performance? What is peak performance for our mind? Like, is it mind over our body? Does our mind, work first and then our body follows, or is it all about physical performance? So we turned all of these amazing inquiry questions that the kids had, and we built our unit of survival around that. So the kids, in science, they were looking at lung capacity. They had physical goals. So it was this beautiful kind of culmination of their, or sort of collaboration, I guess, of all their ideas, but also the learning, as if, just like a homeschool kid, if they were interested in gardening, hopefully that's the way mum would get to steer them. So really similar. And I did mention, I was talking to you about it yesterday, the way that unit ended up finishing was we all did a physical challenge, because we're also talking about mind over matter. So the Sydney kids all went and did the raw challenge, which is a bit like Tough Mudder. Brisbane found a course, so they all had to do this course, which was testing their mental, strength. They were stepping out of their comfort zone, but they were also challenging themselves physically. So that's a beautiful thing when it comes to the students' input. For the food unit that I talked about, where we did food history and awareness, this year they came to us and they said, we want to cook. We want to learn how to make family meals. I want to be able to make dinner for my family. So it wasn't kind of cooking cupcakes or cookies. We cooked bone broth. We looked at, gut health and why it was important. We cooked fermented, we made fermented veggies, and we looked at the history of fermentation and why eating fermented foods is so important. We cooked, we used the bone broth in chicken soups and kind of wholesome family meals like that. We did lasagna, where they did everything from scratch. We did a roast chook, and the families are, calling us going, we just got dinner served by the kids,
That's so cool.
Beautiful life skills that, they're forever with them now, because what 10 or 12-year-old could whip up a lasagna and serve it for the family. And so that was what they wanted. Families gave us input, and they said, we want the kids to be, knife aware and have, oven confidence. So we built all of these things that kids and the families talked to us about, and we built that, to match those needs.
That's so cool. Yeah. So from your experience inside, I'm just going to ask you a question. So from your experience inside for 20, 25 years, 30 years, What's the difference that you've seen in children's growth and transformation from one system to the other?
There's a lot,
Yeah.
but I'll pick.
Yeah.
It's a strong sense of self and knowing who they are because they get to be that without judgment and bullying and peer pressure. That would be my number one. I have such it is the most beautiful thing to see kids step into sharing their quirks, sharing their interests. I know a few of them were into anime, and they told me how at school they were, when they were in mainstream school, they were bullied for that. But they get to just, and another little one's into K-pop, and she gets to say it loud and proud. Like, imagine having an opportunity, in our younger years to step into who we are without fear.
Yeah.
Adults can't do that because we're all scared of judgment and who thinks what. But these kids get to step there and they know it's safe. And I think that is probably the number one joy that I get, that every day I can stop and go, wow, these kids actually can be who they are meant to be.
Which
Because
was next week's episode we recorded yesterday was another one of those moments. I could see you like holding back your emotions. I was watching our we'll talk about it later, watching her speak, and you were like so proud. But I just wanted to circle back to something you said in that question response. How do you go about creating a space where they can feel, I know it's a trigger word out there, but safe and comfortable in expressing who they are, what they do, what they like, because that's a big one inside a big school. They can't really express those things because there's 30 other kids around, a couple of thousand as well, that will judge them, will bully them. How did you create that space? That space that's so safe and important and comfortable for those kids to express who they are.
I think, Nathan, I will have to call on the fact that it has been something I've done even in the mainstream system. So when I think back to my time in Atlanta, very multicultural classroom, and I noticed there was probably around the 20-25 mark in there. But I remembered clearly it was about a year 5 class. The girls, there was some stuff that would happen. So 3 times a week, we had a girls only book club. And I took it on myself over my lunch to bring the girls together to read a book and to talk about girl stuff. I also always, and other teachers would be like, why would you give up your lunchtime? I'm like, because the girls are having problems. And if I don't work with them and work through it, it's going to blow up and it's going to end up making, teaching in the classroom yuck anyway. And also it's kind of like, I saw it as my duty. Like people would say, why don't you have any classroom behavior problems? Well, you've got to work with that. It doesn't, this is the point. Like that's part of our job to help these kids work through. So probably twice a week as well with the whole class, I did a thing called circle time. And that was where we used to share we had lots of boundaries, but that was that safe space to share things that were going on in the class that we needed to workshop and work through. So that was one, when I look back, that was many, many years ago, but that was one thing in America that I always did. I think as well that safety and safe space has been through other different jobs that I've done. But I think also when we do our own work, we are better prepared to be able to create that space and help kids with that. And I can help manage that and create that better because of the work that I've done. I don't think it's a natural. I think I've got to kind of understand my own stuff before I can help create that for kids.
And for someone that's watching and listening that is a teacher currently, and they're saying, "What work are you talking about? What work do I have to do?" We both know what that work is because we're doing it every single day. What is that work?
I think really, if we wanted to sum it up, it's just self-awareness. If we want to just be really simple,
Yeah.
we need to really know ourselves and be aware of when we're triggered. And it might seem, well, what's got to do with creating a safe space? I think it's got a lot to do with creating a safe space because if we don't know all of those triggers, that we are operating in a default system or we're being really unconscious in the way we act, things will happen between kids that we won't think it's a big deal. Oh, it's just kids, whatever. Well, she can get over it. That's not how it works at Lions. If I get a glint of something, we are on it. And it might seem a little bit over the top, like, oh, she's been a little bit bossy. Okay, well, that's fine. No, actually, it's not. Let's work through this. Why do you feel, so we unpack these things and we take things that might start this small, but then they never get big. But if we ignore them because we're kind of just in a default mode and we don't see a problem with it, that's, I think, how things can escalate. And we just don't see it if we're not self-aware. I think we've always got to start with ourselves.
Yeah, and it's awesome that you've created that space, but then you're also asking that child of, oh, so why are you being a little bit bossy, or where does, like, you're asking them to sort of identify that within themselves too. So you're also then getting them to respond, and then that stops that from being something bigger down the road. Yeah, I love that. That's a really powerful thing to do.
And I think as well, Nathan, it's also the kids know we've got our newcomers have often come to us from bullying. So they've been in this mainstream setting and they've experienced it.
Yep.
They know when they come on, they are, kids will be maybe aware, maybe, they know down the track because they share that with the others. But our community welcomes kids with the biggest virtual hug I've ever seen.
That's cool.
Just instantly. And it's because, they've got the empathy because they've been through something. So there's that side of it, but they also know what will not be tolerated. It's just like not even, and I think because they can see that these tiny little things are kind of, it might seem like, come on, but it's not, because it just never gets any further. If I hear one little glimmer, and the kids at Lions, we have 3 agreements. So we don't have rules. We have 3 agreements. They are to show respect to others and yourself, to always do your best, and to have each other's back. And they understand those with story, and we don't just kind of pull out I think in schools there is some well-being curriculum, and it's a bit of a, growth mindset, tick and flick. We really want to unpack this stuff, and we spend a lot of time in this space. And I think that this is where the foundation is. If we can start with this kind of foundation, then that's when kids can learn. I remember saying it from a very young age as a teacher. I used to spend weeks at the beginning of the year doing this stuff. And parents, were a bit confused. I would send letters to say, I'm not doing any academics for the first 2 weeks. It used to push the system, because it's like, hang on, let's get into learning. No, if your child cannot learn, is not safe, they cannot learn. It's that simple. We're in fight or flight, we will take in nothing. So it's not until we really understand this safety and we feel that we can breathe out that kids will actually be able to engage and learn.
That's
So
powerful too. And you're
it's
also doing this. So are you showing them, or not, well, mentoring them and showing and working through those fight, flight, freeze responses and where they particularly come from? Yeah, it's
absolutely.
powerful too.
Yeah, and I think that's right. The older kids understand the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. We teach that for a reason, so that they've got also the language of it. But then we share personal stories. They know so much about me.
That's
But
cool.
in the mornings, mornings we kind of come on, we have a bit of a chat, but sort of from 9 to 9:20 before we start the day, we've called it Magic Morning, and kids get to choose. You're going to do gratitude journaling. Would you like to do breath work? Would you like to do meditation? And we have a bit of a choice to just set our day. So to set ourselves up, in that safer space for learning.
Yeah. So you mentioned something there that if someone's watching, they probably want to know what a typical day would look like. What would a typical day be? I know they might be all different, but what would a typical sort of day? Just
Yeah.
run us through a typical day.
Hop on, Zoom opens, the kids come on, they're all chatting. It's a big kind of space for them to connect and say hello. It's usually some funny joke or, some some topic that you get on and you're like, what are you guys on about? And we're all just part of it. The magic morning might start. So we've often got choices so the kids can do whatever they're feeling that morning. Often it's student run, so we don't run it. The kids can sometimes they create like a wheel where you spin a wheel and it's like a fitness wheel. But for 10 minutes, they go off into breakout rooms and do that. They come back. And then we've just got breakout rooms set up for different areas that they might be doing. So the literacy group might be going off to, look at whatever they're doing for that day. Then there's, if our science teacher or educator is on for the day, they might be going off and doing experiments in the kitchen. Last term was all about chemistry in the kitchen. So they were learning about separating substances through making rosemary hair oil and garlic and honey syrup. So it was epic
That's
chemistry
cool.
unit. Or they're off in a breakout room with our maths educator. So it's all split up. There's 2 breaks in the morning. There's lots of time for group work because we know kids need to collaborate and work together. So there's lots of different breakout rooms where the kids are off doing that. And then at 12:15, the Zoom stays open if they want to connect and finish things off. And then they go off about their day doing other extracurricular activities or whatever else they're involved in at home.
That's cool. That's an awesome day.
We don't need, things are efficient. We don't need to, drag it out. Things can be achieved. And the kids know that. They know they're there for a short time. And so we get in and we
Get going.
get. Mm.
Yeah, because in that other system, they six hours a day and 2 breaks, and it's a very long time for a child to be concentrating and doing these things too. And then if you look at the before and after school care, some are there for 12 hours a day. It's like there's such big days, and just watching and observing and looking at what you guys are doing. These children are so full of energy. They're not tired. They're not, school yesterday, 12 hours and then 12 hours again. Oh, there's so much energy and vibrancy in these children because they're only in there for a short amount of time, but they're not there for hours on end. So they have more energy.
And you know what? In that as well, Nathan, I've got to say, they also are influenced more heavily from their family. And that's how it should be. Have you ever heard of Gaba Mate?
Yeah, I have, yes.
So I can't wait to see him in Sydney in February, by the way. But Hold On to Your Kids is it's one of his newest books, but it's triggering as a parent because we've been brought up to say when the child's 5, off they go for 8-10 hours a day. And they have an influence of teacher and peers for almost more than what the parent influence is.
I've spoken
Because
about
when
it
they,
before. Mm.
yeah, they're tired and then they go to sleep. And what I love about Lions is these kids are homeschooled. These kids should be influenced mostly from their family. And I think you saw that yesterday
I
with
did.
Meher. She, as much as we are, working with the same language that Meher was speaking, this is reinforced at home. And some of this stuff is also initially learnt from home, because I remember when we were unpacking Joe Dispenza last year with some of the work with, our mindset, Meher said, oh, my mum's so excited that I'm doing Joe Dispenza in class as well.
Yeah, she said that yesterday. Actually said that yesterday.
This comes from home.
Mm.
And that is what makes this so beautiful. These are kids that first and foremost, their influence is home. And that's why when you see the school and the way these kids and peers are affecting each other, they're not old enough to have this peer influence. And that's what, the work of Gabor Mate talks about. Children shouldn't be influenced at this young age from each other. No wonder there's bullying.
Yeah.
Like Lord of the Flies, let's and I think back to years ago, because in this journey with Lions, I have really been given the gift of being challenged in my philosophy towards education. And I love that because it's happened my whole career.
Mm.
And even now with the freedom that I get, I'm challenged. So recently we've had some unschooled families joined us. And I'm like, okay, unschooled, we're talking about a child who's 14 and he's barely picked up a pen and paper, like a pen to write. And you know why I've loved it? Because I've gone, oh my goodness, look at what he's learned. You know, he didn't need any actual formal education to be this incredible, because we can learn things at any age. So I love being challenged in this, you know, the different families that are coming to us, because they are so different. This is the point. Lions isn't a one size fits all box. We're not asking, you know, families don't join Lions and then get put into the Lions box. This is absolutely not what we are. We are just a service that complements all these other journeys. So it's pretty beautiful. But I was just going to tell a story. Years ago, I was working at probably one of the most alternate, progressive democratic, they want to call it, schools in Sydney. So it was pretty amazing. I was almost at that pivotal point of, oh, I'm in the system, yet I've found this incredible space to be free. Anyway, I ran into a friend who had gone for preschool, and she'd moved back to Adelaide, but she was unschooling her kids essentially and traveling. That was the way she was educating her kids. She was just traveling Australia. Anyway, I met up with her on her trip and I said, oh, you know, if your kids were, you know, still, if you were still living in Sydney, would your kids be at Kinmar? She's like, no way. Like, no. And I said, why? And she said, because of the social, why would I want my kids in that social environment for 7 hours a day? And I was like, what do you mean? And again, this is where I was challenged. What she, I guess, alerted me to and has taught me is that kids don't need this extended period together, unsupervised half the time.
Yeah.
This is where the issues start to happen. They're put together and there's, you know, and it grows this mean girl behavior. It grows the bullying. That's why the stuff's happening in our schools, because they're just there left unattended for too long.
But they're also watching the TV shows and the movies that are all about that. Like, I know when I was a kid, Mean Girls was a bit of a popular movie amongst the kids I was with. But then they're watching the bullying, like they're getting it through their eyes and their ears, and then they're going to school and they're acting that out as well. So there's another layer to it. It's what they're watching, what they're consuming. Their parents, unfortunately, might be saying things to other people and calling them names, and then the kids pick it up and go, "Well, I'm going to call little Johnny a whatever today." Like, it's all these influences that enable that sort of bullying behavior. Whereas you guys come in and you guys sort of, well, not sort of, you stamp that out. But you don't
Yeah,
have to stamp it out as such because they're already in a space where they're feeling heard and seen anyway.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's short and sharp too. So there's not really room for, you know, because they're not going to be perfect angels either. Kids are going to make mistakes, and we have stuff that we've got to
Mm.
talk about. But for the most part, you know, we're able to undo things is kind of, you know, a beautiful thing to see. We had a student join us last year, and he was your typical naughty kid.
No.
He got, you know, suspended. I think he might have got expelled, you know, all of it. So he was like rolling in this. I talk about it like a stone rolling and the mud was collecting this
Yep.
way. Anyway, mum found Lions, got him on board. You know, initially it was all good. You know, he was vibrant, very, very charismatic, happy, confident. Kids liked him. Then after a little bit of time, he got really, really comfortable, and we started to see that ball roll again, because he'd learned this. That's who he was, as his identity. He was the naughty kid. So he kind of started to step into that a little bit again. We caught it like instantly,
Yeah.
had, you know, meetings with family and stuff. And the beautiful thing was we were able to say, because he was part of these meetings,
Oh,
sweet,
that's an important thing. That's important.
yes.
So
And we
he was
said
part of that.
part
Just
of it,
double confirming. Yep.
part of
Got
these
it.
meetings, and we were able to say, sweetheart, this doesn't have to be your story.
Oh.
You know, this isn't you. We are all on your team. Your mum, me, you, we're all playing on the same team. So when you start to roll this and undo this and go this way, your, you know, stone can turn and be covered in grass. And he's done it. You know, there's little hiccups, but I'm just like, here's this like kid that seriously was going down that road, and he gets it. He gets that he's loved and he's supported. He makes mistakes. He absolutely makes mistakes. But you know what? That's life. As
Yes.
long as, we teach the kids, we just need you to own that mistake. When you step into that and you tell us you are sorry that you did make that mistake, we will love you and we will support you and we will keep helping you move in the right direction. So, I mean, these are just such, how many adults do you know still can't accept responsibility?
Mm.
The thing, it's like we're trying to grow these like wholesome humans, and that's part of our, what we love about our service, that we get to work with families alongside, their journey, raising these beautiful kids and, be part of that. So,
That's awesome. And I was just going to circle back to mistakes too, because a lot of kids are scared of making those mistakes and scared of being failures. We have participation medals and ribbons and stuff in that other system. So I just think that's great that you're promoting and allowing those children to experience the mistake and the failure. But then you're asking them, well, how can you not make that mistake next time? How can you grow from that mistake and failure so that you can learn from it? Rather than being this really scary thing that they go out in society and they're so scared to do something wrong. I
and
love what
that's,
you're doing.
yeah, I remember it so clearly. Private girls' school, very, very well known private girls' school in Sydney. I remember being on assembly. It was a K to 12 assembly, and that principal told those girls that there is no room for failure in this setting.
Oh,
And I
wow.
remember sitting there going, oh, wow, what a message. There is no room. Failure is how we grow.
Yeah.
I think actually one of our kids did a podcast on this. He had that initial mindset from mainstream school and how his journey has shown him that um, he now knows he can fail. Just talking about that, the kids, I was going to say, the kids did the podcast that, yeah, we've got a channel now. So that's really
We're going to put
awesome.
that in the show notes. So we might as well talk about it. So these children inside the Lions do all sorts of cool things. I did highlight what they were all doing. Podcasting is one of them. And for anyone out there, they have their own Spotify channel. There'll be a link to that in the show notes. I've listened to most of them. I don't believe that they're actually 15, 16, however old
I'm
they're older
younger.
than that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's unreal the things they're saying, how self-aware they are, how conscious they are. And that podcast you just said might be one I need to listen to as well about that one doing about that. So let's talk about the podcasting unit of work that was because it showcased in a beautiful way yesterday for next week's episode.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
We have one of our terms, we have a big focus on social emotional intelligence and well-being. That's just kind of, how I said before, survival was a bit of a theme, food's a bit of a theme. This is a bit of a theme. Like I said, it's not just a week or a lesson that you pick up in a mainstream classroom. This is a term's worth of like unit of study. That's, we're always weaving it in, but we also have a big focus. Last year, when we did this unit, the younger kids were sort of looking at things like what it means to be kind and how to be a good friend, because sometimes we need guidance around that when we're little. It's not just assumed and then the older kids looked into mindset, gut brain connection, hormones, how they affect us, dopamine addiction, and they wrote ebooks, which you'll have to put a link to those too, Nathan, the
I
ebook.
will. Yep.
So this term, same theme, but we said to the kids, we've got a big challenge. So although we want the kids' input and they get to guide it, we did kind of flag with them we were going to be stepping into a podcasting unit. So all these ideas that they had in their ebooks, we kind of wanted to teach them how to write scripts, work with the spoken word, so learning how to actually write for voice, which is a real nuanced kind of area as well, because the way we write isn't how we speak. So there was a lot of beautiful teaching moments in there to help them. And then also stepping into that confidence of
Mm,
speaking, which you heard from their hair.
yeah.
The kids were freaking out about their voice. Like, So were we. Like, Annalie and I, we were doing our first one and we shared it with the kids and we were just like, cringe, this is terrible. So we were with the kids knowing how hard it was to hear our voices back. So the journey of this podcasting unit, we offered them all term seeds of inspiration. So there was never a set, you must do a podcast on X. It was seeds of inspiration. But the kind of overarching message we were trying to help them come out or bring out was important things for other teens to know or for other kids to know, things that were on their heart that they just wanted to get off their chest and share, or things around this idea of the world outside of themselves. So we looked and did studies into asylum seekers and refugees. We went and volunteered at a homeless, Feed the Homeless. So each of the different hubs that we have, so our Brisbane Byron crew, they went and helped in a DV, domestic violence centre for women, and helped gather and make all these little bags. Sydney crew, we all met up with parents as well. Parents are always part of these, these little trips because it's, part of the process. We all met up at a homeless, like food for the homeless, and we cooked a whole lot of meals and, learned a lot about homelessness. So kids did podcasts on what it means, what is mental and physical homelessness. Also, they were inspired.
Yeah.
The kids were also reading, beautifully juicy novels to help inspire things. So two of my boys, they read The Outsiders,
Oh yeah.
and they did a podcast on rivalry because that's what, the themes of that book were about. So they looked at rivalry and they talked about that within a mainstream school setting. So it was beautiful to see the way, and that's what I said at the beginning, I'm going to scatter some seeds in your little podcast garden, and whatever, plants grow, amazing. And, some of the topics, like we've got Paige, the episode yesterday, she's talking about something really personal, which was body image.
Oh, I
Yeah,
listen.
we've got another two boys who have a real amazing chat about body dysmorphia in boys.
Wow.
I know. So the topics that these kids have picked, one of the other kids, actually two of them, they picked, I came into a breakout room one day and I was like, what are you guys doing? Because I kind of jumped in and they're having a good old chat. And then I realized they were practicing their podcast script and it was about being the younger sibling.
Oh wow.
And it was just like, oh my goodness. And then, because obviously these are topics that, that kind of tween teen can
Yeah, but
really
they're deep though.
they're deep, but our younger ones, because we've got kids, 8, 9, 10,
Yep.
they were free. So, little Jack, he's done a podcast on megamouth sharks and he goes on a journey in a submarine. But they learned all the podcasting software on Audacity. They learned about how to find all the sound effects and music and all the little fillers, the intros, the outros. They learned how to record, to convert files into MP4.
Mm.
Was the most insane learning curve all of us have ever experienced, not just the kids. And I did say yesterday, the collaboration is what blew me away the most. It was, we were not, we didn't have the knowledge. So to be like, oh, is Dave here today? Is Elijah here today? So he can help you with the, fading in and fading out or whatever, equalizing or whatever it might be, because these kids went on their own path of learning, and we're kind of making podcasts too along the way with them and sharing our journey. So it was a really beautiful unit to do together. And the one of the biggest things I try and do, because again, in a homeschool setting, the learning would be real. For the most part, you've got that child maybe working with dad building a deck, or you've got, these kids are traveling perhaps. So all the learning isn't because we say so. The learning is because there's a purpose. So the fact that these podcasts are on a channel is exactly what we aim for. The ebooks can be downloaded. We want to move that to, if they ever do get a platform or if they're on social media, they could buy them for $1. Other teens, they can then make money from that. So all of the things, the homemaking book that they created is for a purpose. One of our girls is horse mad. So she came to me and she said, because some of the kids were doing homemaking books like, bit of recipe books, bit of like the boys were doing like how to change a light bulb, or, lots of different homey things. Nina came to me and she said, Amanda, could I do a book about horse uh, natural remedies? Of course, like our goal is to say yes. Like we want to say yes to any of your ideas. So off she goes. This is the most beautiful thing that Nina has unraveled with us. And you can see her ebook and then hear her podcast.
I've heard her
Her
podcast.
So
Mm.
her horse Jack had died. She wrote this ebook about natural remedies that could potentially save other horses from the same sickness, colic that Jack died of. So her grief drove her to create this incredible ebook. When she presented it, everyone was crying. And then
The
she goes,
podcast was so good too.
I know. Then she goes on to write podcasts around grief. Like
Yes,
she's
that was, yeah,
14.
I
Like
know.
who gets to talk about grief like this? She's a child and she
Yeah,
understands the cycle. She understands how we move through it. We have to move with it. Like most people just go and drink it away. Like,
yeah. There's a backstory to this. Amanda, when I connected with Amanda, one of the first things she sent me was that podcast that Nina did. And I had goosebumps. I was emotional listening to it. And then I asked Amanda after I heard it in about 5 minutes, it's only a short one, how old she was. And I couldn't believe she was 14. Like this podcast, we'll put a link to that in the show notes. Go away and listen to a 14-year-old talk about grief. And it sounded like someone that had lost, well, yeah, a horse. Like just the most beautiful podcast I'd ever heard. It was unreal.
I think, what I love when I think about Neen's, if she goes on to potentially be a vet and, work as an integrative vet, perhaps because she's so into these natural remedies, what she researched for her ebook. But to
Wow.
think that we were able to give her space to
Mm,
do, if she was in a school, where's the space for her to go and spend all those hours to, create that kind of,
not
do you
there.
know what I mean? So that's what I love is that our lions, all our kids have got these beautiful unique gifts and talents, and we want to create that space for them to grow. And that's part of it, student choice all the time. Like, tell us you want to go in that direction, okay, we'll help shape it. So obviously it's not a free for all because it would
Yeah.
be really manage you know continual, like everything different, but we steer whatever we can to work with the child. So one of our students with these podcasts, he knew he was one of our older kids. So we knew we wanted our older kids to try and stay with our social, emotional, intelligent well-being theme. Anyway, he was a little bit like, a bit confused. He came to me and said, Amanda, I really like Formula One, like I do car racing. I said, okay, this is good. Keep talking to me. Talk to me. So can I do my podcast on car racing? And I'm like, yeah, I want you to talk to me more about car racing in your life. So what he ended up doing was, how discipline and, how motivation and discipline and everything he gets from car racing. So the car racing was just his story, but he ended up being able to nail the topic that we kind of were guiding the kids to find. Another one of the kids really was into dirt biking. So again, worked with him because we didn't just want it. Here's a podcast on dirt biking. We worked with him and he did a podcast on perseverance, and how by getting, having all these falls and having to get back on. So dirt biking was the story. And
Mm.
I just love that we can say yes to the kids. That's what ultimately we want. We're doing this term's a big study on our world.
Ooh.
And yeah, so they're going to it's pretty massive. We're doing art history. We're sort of looking at how the past shapes and still influences our world today. Looking at appreciating the past and looking at how it has influenced us. But the kids will go on a bit of a journey to a country that they choose. A whole lot of different matrix choices they get from. But one of the cool things they helped us work out, because this is what they wanted to know how to plan a holiday too.
Ooh.
They'll be booking flights, accommodation, budgeting, doing all the commerce and maths side. So they'll be learning all that in maths, but then actually going and doing the planning and the budgeting for, a holiday of their choice,
Another
wherever
life skill.
another
That's
life.
cool. Yeah. Amanda, that was an awesome chat. We both have to jump off soon. So that was a really awesome chat. if there is a family out there, actually, I'm going to ask two questions. If there's a family out there that wants to get involved in this, what's the process and how can they find more information? Because we'll put some stuff in the show notes too.
Yeah, so Lions Homeschool Hub is our website. So we'll put that. And there's
Yep.
a contact us form there that you
Oh,
can, so you
perfect.
can already be homeschooling,
Yep.
which is fine. And maybe you just, you want that more support or you want more connection with other kids because we obviously have the different hubs. The kids catch up, the kids are online together. We do have family outings, we have family excursions, we have family camps. If you're not homeschooling, you can still contact us. We can talk about it and we can help you with that application process as well.
Even better. Yep. And
So,
Amanda,
because
another question. Oh, sorry, keep going. Sorry, I didn't realize you were still going. Yep.
sometimes just when you've been in the system, we've got families who've needed to almost have a year of like just peeling away. And I just want to also say it's really important. Still contact us because we've got kids with so many different goals. Like we've got kids who come from mainstream and literally they've joined and their goal is just to come.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
And it's okay. We've got other kids who their goal is to show up every day, but to try and talk a little bit because they're so traumatized and they've got to undo so much that's happened to them that we're going to always have different goals for different kids. So don't ever be, all unschooling families. I'm actually going to visit, a family 2 hours away from where I am just to talk through, to meet with the kids, to help with that transition. So it's not kind of, sink or swim. That's
Yeah.
not the environment because that wouldn't happen at home. That's what we're about. It's about holding your hand as much as we need to so that the transition is smooth because that's how it would be if you were homeschooling at home. We're just that kind of complement.
That's awesome. I got one more question. We can wrap it up with this one. So, you're gonna put your teacher hat on here. If there's a teacher out there that's struggling the way we both were, what's a piece of advice you can give that teacher to find some empowerment and to find
Mm.
something to be able to, you know what I'm asking you? What's a piece of advice you can give a teacher right now that's currently struggling inside, but is conscious and aware and all these things, but they're just there because they
We
have
need
to
to.
be. Yeah. Yeah. Because there's a lot of teachers out there that are struggling inside. So what's a piece of advice?
I think we're I think step into what you know
Yeah.
more. Like I know it's scary and I'm not saying break rules, but I think sometimes stopping and stepping into having that conversation with the class, like getting off, like if there was a tangent, sometimes this happens in a classroom, like you're teaching something, a kid brings something up and you want to go there, like go there with them because that I feel like opens up the world where not only you get inspired and energized, but it sparks then something else in the kids because ultimately a happy teacher is a happy classroom.
Yeah.
Like that's I've always found that when we come in happy and inspired, you are absolutely giving all that energy to the kids, and then they're amazing, and then you're having an amazing day, and then you change lives. So I feel like that would be my biggest. I know it can be scary, but I would say go there sometimes when it goes to get diverted, go with the kids.
I
Take
love
take
that.
and just because they know. And also be open to them being more of your teacher, I feel like. Step back, let them talk more.
That
I feel
was
like
an
we
awesome podcast and an awesome way to wrap things up. Amanda, I need to get you back on with some more of these. Speaking of that, actually, I need to get you back on with some more of these powerful, unbelievable crew members of yours that you call them because next week's episode for everyone out there listening and watching, next week's is one of the best podcast episodes I've ever recorded. I've done 100 and something of these now, and this was my favorite. We had a 14-year-old Meher on. and she was talking like someone that had lived for like 100 years. It blew my mind. She was talking about Joe Dispenza and meditation and journaling, and we went on this awesome chat. And she was so knowledgeable and so conscious, and I was like I was in heaven listening to her speak. And she wants to do TED Talks, and I don't want to give too much away, but that podcast I was super proud of. Amanda, I could see it, and people will watch it next week. They'll see you. You were pretty emotional listening to her speak. That podcast was phenomenal. This one was too, but unfortunately, Amanda, that one next week's a bit better.
It was. Never beat
Yeah.
her.
So, Amanda, I hope everyone enjoyed this chat today. Amanda, can people find you on social media if they want to? If there's a teacher that wants a bit of help or a bit of advice from someone like you, can they find you somewhere?
Yeah, it's Amanda's Awake
Yep.
under on Insta. We'll put it in your.
Yeah, we'll put Amanda's in the social in the show notes, and if anyone wants to reach out to Amanda for some advice or some help, Amanda is there for you as well. So, Amanda, thank you for your time today. We both have to jump off soon. This has been the Breaking Free podcast. Stay tuned for next week. That next week's going to blow your minds. I'll see you guys again real soon. This podcast it's taken a turn, and I'm loving the turn it's taken. So I'll talk to you guys again soon. Cheers.